Hello, I'm Edward Fairfax. Welcome to Views of a Progressive Christian. This is the video internet series which presents points of interest to the progressive Christian community, also to the theological and secular communities around the world. For this installment of Views of a Progressive Christian, as well as for all installments, we will be using as our references the Holy Bible, both the Old and the New Testaments, and my own humble volume, Views of a Progressive Christian, which is available at Amazon.com and at the Yahoo group, Views of a Progressive Christian. There, readers will find a direct link and a discount code to make the book even more affordable. Progressive Christianity is a seemingly modern point of view that embraces both the secular disciplines of history and science, as well as the religious institutions of prayer and scripture. Today, we will be discussing the Bible and the church, because the two things are by no means synonymous. The progressive Christian accepts the duality of these establishments, both the Bible and the church, and differentiates between the two, seeing each for what it is and each for what it is not. Whether you are a believer in Jesus Christ or in any prophet or any religion, the influence of this roughly 2,000-page book we simply call the Bible is undeniable. It is important to note, however, that many modern Christians disavow any reverence of the Old Testament, as it rings of violence and bloodletting, much more so than the New Testament. Whether one's estimation is of Christ's divinity, mere greatness, or even simply legend, one cannot comprehend any of these things without embracing the historical context that knowledge of the Old Testament offers. The Old Testament cannot be discarded by followers of the New, any more than the New Testament can be discarded by those who follow neither. So a progressive Christian embraces both the Old and the New Testaments. Not merely a novel or book of legend or myth, not merely a book of military history and tactics, not merely a book of poetry and prose. The Bible is all of these and more. The battles detailed in the Old Testament have been used in the strategy of almost every major world conflict since ancient times. The quotes of King David's Psalms are echoed in funerals the world over, for those who are religious and those not. The edicts of the Ten Commandments are inseparable from the conscripts of Western law. Jesus himself, a rabbi whose ministry lasted only 3 years, is arguably the most quoted figure in recorded history. But Jesus, a historically true figure by most modern accounts, spoke only in parable. And so the historical document of his teaching, so popular that it inspired 4 separate accounts, all of which exist to this day, is riddled with his parables. The modern mind, so programmed to recognize category over individuality, seeks to classify the one or the other, but struggles to embrace the duality, the coexistence of both. But suffice it to say that a progressive Christian feels no conflict, allowing for both parable and history. In fact, the progressive Christian hails not only the comfortable coexistence of the two, but the mandated union thereof. Though it is a matter of much speculation, there is no way of knowing how many Christians, or non-Christians for that matter, have actually read the Bible. All estimates put the number of Bibles sold every year at between 25 and 100 million. Yet it seems the vast majority of modern Christians, and an even more vast majority of others, rely upon other people to read and interpret the Bible for them. As such, they have no strong belief system, only a weak reliance on the belief system of another. with which they may have only a passing, a long gone, or in many cases, a completely non-existent acquaintance. Thus, essentially, was the concept of a church created. A cursory glimpse at history indicates that only the elite could read or write until just the last century or two. Not only was it a practical must for the clergy to interpret the Bible for its congregation, it became the very seed of the church's power over them. Herein lies the crux of the progressive Christians' concern for the church, so called and capitalized because, quite aside from the specific teachings of the Christ, the church has become a singular entity, something completely other, a thing at times greedy and lecherous, even malevolent, all things antithetical to the Christ and his teachings. A progressive Christian well understands the differences between the Christ and the church. That difference mainly being the church leaders and their attempt to protect the political and social strength of the church and their own personal fortunes and futures, even at the expense of their congregations at large, and their Lord in whole. But the progressive Christian, armed with a modern secular understanding, embraces the difference between the Christ and the church, between the Bible and between those who manipulate it. To look at the Bible is to see the record of a culture, and part of that culture is a certain degree of myth. Myth is a part of every culture in the recorded human experience. From George Washington's cherry tree to Davy Crockett's lightning bolt, upon which he claimed to ride and down which he claimed to slide. From Paul Bunyan's Blue Ox Babe to the aiming and batting prowess of baseball great Babe Ruth. American culture is steeped in myth. In fact, all cultures everywhere have myth as part and parcel of their historical record. Yet, we do not discard the history of these cultures simply because there is an active mythic ingredient that is central to their construct. Yet the events of the Bible, because they are so closely related to their own mythic aspects, have become fictionalized by the mainstream secular community until only recently. The talking snake of Genesis, Noah's world-encompassing flood, Goliath's 40-foot height, are all mythic elements. Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, whose existence nobody doubts, even though the only traces of his existence are his many writings, the account of his life by others, and several stone representations. King David has left no less of a trace of his own existence, yet he is discarded by many as a figure of myth because of certain exaggerated aspects of a single tale associated with his life, exaggerations that are common to all oral traditions. Jesus as a tall, pale Aryan with blue eyes and blonde hair, wistfully turning himself over to be sacrificed. This aspect of Jesus is as mythic in many ways as his arguable resurrection. This is, of course, the European view, the expression of Renaissance ideals of human form, but they don't serve as an adequate historical record. Historians will now tell you that Jesus of Nazareth was dark-haired, broader built, a smart and shrewd teacher who spoke in parable to protect himself and his cohorts, for they were criminals and the state was fast on their heels. This misinterpretation of Jesus as a merciful victim and not a clever young warrior has led to a misinterpretation of biblical text and of history. Old views of Jesus Christ and of his teachings must be reconsidered in a fresh historical perspective. What do we have then? We have a book that is beyond the limitations of traditional definition. We have a church which is beyond the blind trust of a wholly compliant congregation. We have a new world, a world which gives us new information based on technologies that have not been available. We have a Bible which has been available for many, many generations, but which continues to reveal its secrets as it is studied in greater detail. And finally, we have a society which is freed of the dogma that singularly defines the one thing or the other and pits them into a state of false conflict. A progressive Christian differentiates between the Bible and the church, between history and myth. But the progressive Christian embraces both for what they are, not for what they are claimed to be by others. Until next time, I'm Edward Fairfax. This is Views of a Progressive Christian, and I urge you to keep believing and also to keep thinking. Thank you.